Hello, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 10 of the AusCannaPodcast. I'm your host, Christina McMillan, and as you can clearly or not so clearly hear, I haven't gotten my voice back. So without any fanfare, we're going to jump right into today's podcast with Lisa Nguyen, founder and CEO of Astrid, Australia's first female-led boutique dispensary specializing in medicinal cannabis.
All right. So I like to start every episode with a little bit of rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Swimming or sunbathing?
Ooh, sunbathing.
Instagram or Snapchat?
Oh, Instagram.
What do you value most in your closest friendships?
Oh, these are good questions. Quality time.
Oh, I like it. Calling or texting?
Calling.
What's your favorite way to start the day?
Coffee with sun on my face.
Oh, me too. I'm a big coffee and outside kind of person. Me too. That's a
Uh-huh.
great way to start the morning for sure. Um, food on a skewer or food in a tiny spoon.
Ooh, skewer.
Mm. Coffee shop or library.
Ooh, that's a hard one. Um, Coffee shop with a library.
Oh, look at you, little comedy, little comedy. I like it. What's your go-to dance move when nobody is watching?
Oh. My go-to dance move is dancing. This happened a few weeks ago with my top inside out with Taylor Swift playing, and I'm just jiggling my ass.
Yeah. I love it. I love
On a
it.
lot of cannabis.
I love it. I love it. Look, my husband and my teenage son would tell you that as long as my tongue is out, it doesn't matter what the actual move is. I seem to, when I get really into dancing, I seem to stick my tongue out. So yeah, I guess that's my secret thing but I do
That's
it
a
when
good
everybody's
move.
watching. So all right. What's your secret weapon for surviving long meetings?
Oh, I'm a doodler. Like I need to, because I'm very creative, so I need to have paper and pen in front of me so I can draw, so that I can keep track of where I can visually draw where the meeting's going, if that makes sense.
No, I like it. I like it because I'm kind of the same way with my journal and how I kind of do
Yeah,
things. It's a
yeah,
little bit of writing, it's a little bit of
yeah,
doodling. It
yeah,
all ties it all together.
exactly.
Yeah.
I
No,
can't do the digital thing. Like I think like a lot of my cousins are in their 20s and they do everything on their iPads. Like they've got like the digital pens, and I'm like, no, 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 no. I need a real pen and I need real paper and I need to write.
me too. Me too. There's something about touching the pen and the
Yeah,
paper and
yeah,
just how it, yeah,
yeah.
no, I am 100% with you for that one, for sure. Would you rather have a talking pet monkey or a talking pet penguin?
Oh, I think penguin.
Any particular reason?
I think monkeys move around a lot and penguins seem more chill.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. I like it. I didn't even think about that, but you're very right. Um, if your life had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh, uh, this is a hard one because I don't remember names of songs. Um, I think that it would be. I just went to a Snow Allegra concert, so I'm very Snow Allegra obsessed at the moment. But there's a song called "Someone Like You" by Snow Allegra, which I really love.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that song, but
It's a good song.
what about it kind of resonates with you?
I think it's like it's about meeting someone and then making the most of life and like just rolling with the punches.
That's a good life
Like
lesson.
enjoying the little moments in life and like, everything is possible as long as you've got the right person, the right team, or the right people behind you.
No, I believe that totally. You just need that one person to wholeheartedly believe in what you're doing, and anything is
Yeah.
possible.
That person that doesn't think you're crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Very
Yeah.
important. Very important. Um, what's your favorite imaginary job title that you've given yourself when playing make believe as a kid?
As a kid.
As a kid. I mean, look, if you're still playing
Oh,
make believe
yes.
now, if you're still
I
doing
still
it.
I still have dreams to be a singer one day, but I can't sing. I'm very tone deaf. I don't remember names of songs.
But it's still this reoccurring dream that you still have.
Yeah, it's like sometimes when I'm listening to like YouTube or listening to like going to concerts, I'm like, oh, it's so awesome to be an artist. I just love to sing. I also have dreams of being a poet one day, which is still similar. It's like storytelling, it's art, it's like
It's
music.
creative.
Yeah, it's creative. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
What's your break in case of emergency, stress relief snack?
Oh, it depends on the month, but currently it's Tim Tams.
Ooh, any particular one?
Just the original.
You're like, I'm not a fancy girl. I just do you Tim Tam slam it in the coffee?
Nah, I just like it straight.
Me too. I actually really like to put my Tim Tams, and this is probably like sacrilegious, but I like to put mine in the freezer and then chop them up and have them on top of ice cream.
Oh,
Like
that's
just
a good
plain
idea.
vanilla ice cream.
That's good.
It's delicious, right? But
It's like a
there's people,
crumble.
yeah, but there's some people that are like, no, you don't ever put chocolate in the freezer. Like that's like
Make the
horrible.
biscuit chocolate. So
Which is what I say. I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, it tastes still.
yeah.
Look, you haven't lived until you've put a couple things in the freezer,
Hmm.
chop them up, and then use them
Hmm.
for toppings on plain ice cream. All right. So last question. What's the
Hmm.
most valuable lesson you've learned from a failure?
Oh, there's been a lot of things with Astrid and in the cannabis industry, but my most valuable lesson is to not take things so seriously. There's always going to be stuff. You got to pick yourself up and just try again. And yeah, don't sweat the small stuff. Everything will pass.
Excellent. That is solid advice on multiple levels for sure. All right. So, for the listeners who don't know anything about you, Lisa, do you mind
Hmm.
giving us a brief introduction?
Sure. So my name is Lisa, and I'm the CEO and founder of Astrid Dispensary and Clinic. And we were one of the first few dispensaries that opened about 4 years ago that specializes in medicinal cannabis education and dispensing. And we've got a team of really awesome doctors, pharmacists, nurses, technicians, and just cannabis experts now.
Yeah, okay. So, before I dive into what inspired you to start Astrid,
Mhm.
how did you first kind of become interested in plant medicine?
So my background is I'm a pharmacist, and I've actually been in cannabis for 7 years, and I've been a pharmacist for 12 years. So I'm officially been in cannabis longer than I've been a pharmacist, which is really, really interesting. But I started working in the pharmaceutical cannabis industry about 7 years ago. Very close to when cannabis was first legalized as a prescription medicine in Australia. So I worked as a medical rep or an MSL for a few different companies, but the first company that I worked at was called MedLab. And they're a small kind of boutique Australian cannabis company. Back then, there was only about 3 brands in market then. There wasn't very many. And then I moved to a global Canadian company called Canopy Growth about 2 years after that. Once the industry started to grow a little bit more, it was very early days when I joined the cannabis industry. There's probably only like 10 doctors that knew how to prescribe. The access pathway was very difficult. I remember doing paper applications with doctors. There's no digital applications, no such thing. And it would take weeks or months before a doctor will get approved to prescribe a product. And then it'll take weeks for products to come in. And so then the whole journey for the patient was very, very convoluted. And then when I joined Canopy, the Canadian company, they were based in Melbourne, so I moved back to Melbourne. And it was great because they were global, which meant that I could learn from these incredible global leaders from all around the world. And they were great. They were such a great company in that they always invested in their people. And so they flew me to Ottawa a couple of times where their head office is. And I saw the grow facility. I had like meetings with leaders from Africa and the UK and Europe, and I learned about how the medicinal cannabis space worked within different global jurisdictions and the regulatory framework and what different patients from all around the world were needing. And also we laid that with clinical research as well. And Canopy did a lot of clinical research for different therapeutic areas. Their main focus was pain, mood, and sleep. And so being in a room full of academics, researchers, and really, really exceptional business people who've come from ex-pharma was incredible. And I learned a lot. And I came back to Australia and saw a big gap for a dispensary in Australia. And so that's kind of how it all kind of came about.
Okay, so that's kind of I guess, the momentum that you came back and you were like, hey, there's this opportunity here. And that's kind of what triggered.
Yeah, I went to Canada and we also went to growth facilities. We met with distributors. We also went to a lot of awesome dispensaries. And I remember coming in to a dispensary, walking up to the bench and just choosing a sativa flower. And the bud tender just put it into a bag for me. And then I just sat down and it was the most simplistic experience. And also it was so beautiful and it looked like an Apple store. And they had booths for people to sit down and actually, like there was a person, like there's a couple behind me and they were on a date. And I was like, this is awesome.
That is awesome.
There was no stigma. It was so normal.
And so you thought to yourself, this is definitely what Australia is missing, so to speak.
Well, I went to Canada and I felt so inspired and I felt so liberated, if that makes sense, because I came from Australia where it was so frustrating taking months for a doctor to get authorized, taking months for a pharmacy to prescribe, and then taking, months for me to actually empower the pharmacist and the doctor to understand that this is a medicine and that it's okay. It's not a scary thing. That whole thing there's a lot of stigma 7 years ago, a lot easier now for sure. And a lot of that stigma is, less so now, but going to Canada, having that experience where it's so easy and accessible and no stigma and there's no shame associated with using cannabis in Canada, and coming back here, I felt frustrated. Not really like, it wasn't like, yes, identified a gap, but it fueled from a place of annoyance and frustration. I'm like, why is there so much shame? Why is there so much stigma? Why isn't anyone doing something that is more accessible but also modern and actually celebrates people coming in to actually access it and making a space for education? And so I was like, you know what, since no one's doing it, I'm going to do it. And I had this amazing vision I had it in my head, I had green walls, I had terrazzo stone, I wanted leaves everywhere, I wanted that initial emotional feeling of safety and comfort and education and a safe space to speak about cannabis freely in Australia. And at that time, there was no one really doing that.
So definitely trailblazer for sure. How did you manage to navigate the regulatory landscape when you were starting Astrid? Because you're clearly one of the first out of the gates. Like I said, you're a trailblazer, so it's got to be all new. How did you do that?
Yep. I think it really helped that I already had about 3 to 4 years of cannabis experience under my belt. So from a doctor perspective and pharmacy perspective, the logistics of those things, I knew that back to front because I had to help doctors and pharmacists, like help pharmacists learn how to order and teach pharmacists, how to counsel, that sort of thing. And I had to teach doctors how to prescribe and go through all those logistics. The missing piece for me was, well, how do I open a dispensary with the current regulations? As a pharmacist, I knew that a pharmacist can legally open a pharmacy, but I didn't want to buy a existing pharmacy because it didn't look like what I wanted in my head.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I thought, okay, well, if I don't want to buy something that's existing, plus it was way too expensive to buy an existing pharmacy because you're buying all the existing stuff, and I don't want to buy all that anyway. And so I thought, well, since I don't want to buy their shelving, their stock, their staff, their processes, why don't I just start from scratch? And then I can build my own thing from the very beginning. And that for me was almost it was almost more liberating because I didn't have the baggage of another brand.
Yeah.
I find like blank canvas is really, really fun because I'm like, I can do whatever I want. And so then, the missing piece was if I knew and I was excited about building a new brand by myself, and I love building brands, it's one of my passions. Then the hardest thing for me was figuring out, well, regulatory wise, what do I need to do to open a pharmacy? It's called a greenfield pharmacy where it doesn't have an existing kind of like name or presence, or it's like from scratch in Melbourne, in Victoria. And so then I just worked with the Victorian Pharmacy Authority to figure out the logistics and the regulatory framework. First step was finding location. And so it's all part of brand building. When I built the brand, knowing where I wanted it. I knew I wanted Chapel Street in Melbourne because I wanted to have it in an area where it can be normalized. So it can have, people walking past to go to brunch, people walking past to go to work, Channel 10's around the corner. I wanted this there to normalize cannabis. So people coming in can be like, oh, what do you do? It doesn't look like a cannabis dispensary, but I can use that as an opportunity to educate. And that's been really successful in that sense. And then it was because I had a very specific flow and design, it was something that the pharmacy board were very like, ooh, this doesn't look like what everyone else has submitted to us before in the past. And so it was more about working with them rather than against them, and making them understand that actually, yes, it does look different, but I still ticked off all the things that you need me to tick off. It just looks like very pretty.
Well, okay. So how do you see like the relationship between plant-based medicine and pharmaceuticals evolving? Because again, you're not in that typical pharmaceutical space.
Yeah. For me, I'm really passionate about cannabinoids, but I'm also really passionate about plant-led wellness as well. And so I think that patients have come from a history of using a lot of synthetic pharmaceuticals, and I've come from working in community pharmacy. I've worked in hospitals. So I've seen the way the world works in pharmaceutical land. But I think that there's a beautiful synergy of patients who can choose not to be on that if they don't want to, if it's not working for them, and they can shift over to the plant-led or plant-based or cannabinoid therapy. It doesn't even have to be cannabinoid therapy, because I believe that cannabis can be used in conjunction with more holistic care in a way that can actually help bridge therapeutic outcomes in future. And it can be things like supplements, diet, nutrition, and other plant therapies that can help patients actually reduce symptoms of anxiety and pain, stress, sleep, that sort of thing.
I was gonna say, so how do you manage patients' expectations when they come to you? Because I'm for me, part of plant medicine and part of the reason I'm turned to cannabis is because I didn't like all of those side effects that I was getting from pharmaceuticals. I mean,
Yeah.
they were helping, but
Yep.
they weren't helping the way I wanted. So how
Yep.
do you manage your patients' expectations when they come to you?
I think by the time patients come to us, they've already exhausted most other options, and most patients that come to us, very interestingly, most of our patients are very, very medical patients. So they usually are patients with, endometriosis, or they've got cancer pain, or they have very complex mental health conditions. And so they've been on a cocktail of a lot of medicines already, and they're usually really exhausted and they just want another option. And so for us, it's creating a haven for them to explore different cannabinoids in a space where there is people there to support. And it's not to say they stop taking their pharmaceuticals. It's about continuing to use the pharmaceuticals, but then being able to reduce, strengths of antidepressants, for example, so that you have less side effects. And then you can increase CBD dose. And different kind of treatment modalities like that helps to still support the condition for the patient. But most patients that come to us know that they can come and speak very openly about the condition. They can say, you know what, I've been using black mark and I just don't want to do it anymore, and I want to do it in the legitimate way. How do I do that? I'm happy to speak to my GP. And so then our doctors will always write letters back to corresponding GPs. There is transparency between different healthcare professionals. I think that's really important to build credibility, especially when cannabis has so much taboo within the medical space. It's perceived as something that's not legitimate because there's lacking in evidence. But if we are working with other healthcare professionals, with regular GPs, with specialists, and actually corresponding with them and actually showing them real world evidence of how patients are improving, we are then moving the dial on stigma and perception of this medicine.
I was going to say, is that how you kind of push back against those traditional healthcare providers who are just kind of like, meh, meh, meh. It's, they don't believe it because there's nothing there to back it up. So is that kind of like an important part of your communication to build that look, hey, this patient is having a great, successful outcome, and let me tell you about it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think in the early days when I first launched Astrid, probably the first 2 years, I had a bit of that from external healthcare professionals like psychiatrists or GPs or palliative care specialists who didn't really know who we were. And so they were very skeptical. And there was a lack of education for healthcare professionals, especially doctors back then. But now, interestingly, we don't get pushback. If anything, we get a lot of referrals from specialists and GPs who refer to our clinic. Or like I get pharmacists from different pharmacies calling my pharmacist asking for advice. I used to be the pharmacist on the phones, and I used to answer a lot of queries from other pharmacies. And they'll just say, I've got a patient, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And we'll just help them through the process. So I feel like it is about collaboration. It is about empowering that community. And now, like, yesterday I was invited to the University of Canberra to do a guest lecture for cannabis for a cohort of, pharmacy students in their final year. And it's things like that will help to move the dial, because these are, pharmacy students who are about to graduate. And if they're going into their workplaces and they're telling their colleagues, actually, I learned about this at university, this is a legitimate thing now. And then they're telling their preceptors who probably didn't have that, that education, then it becomes legitimate. And so we are doing things a little bit slower at Astrid, I believe, because we're trying to make sure that we're legitimizing this as a medicine for our patients.
No, I love it. That makes me excited to hear that obviously there was pushback at the beginning, but now you're getting people who are calling you for the advice and saying, how do I navigate this? How do I make this work for my patient? Do you have like one patient story maybe that kind of like sticks out to you, that you kind of, when you're talking to these people and engaging with the naysayers, that you potentially fall back on, that you're like, this one's got a soft spot in my heart because look at where this person has come?
I have a few, and it depends on what kind of, like, where I'm at in my life, interestingly. And interesting that where I'm at in my life is I'm very passionate now about women's health, with a lot of things I'm going through personally. And I feel like cannabis can play a big role in a lot of women's health treatments as well. And it's so taboo. Like, I've been speaking to a lot of women who have endo, and I'm talking to them about, well, what things they're using for their endo pain. And I've loved hearing how they've been exploring different treatment modalities. So whether it's an oil, but sometimes I might dabble with a bit of flour, but actually they've got a lot of pelvic pain, so then using a lot of cream. And I find that really, really inspiring that there is now more and more women feeling empowered, but feeling safe using these products for these kind of conditions, which are really, really debilitating.
Yeah, no, they are for sure. And so I think that's awesome that again, I see what you're saying about how different as you're going through different stages in your life, different people's
Yes.
stories resonate with you for sure.
Yeah.
Um, how do you, well, first of all, I want to say congratulations on your recent win at the Cannabiz Awards
Oh, thank
for,
you.
I believe it was Best Patient Initiative. So, briefly talk to me about what, the Driving Forward campaign is.
Mhm. So the Driving Forward campaign was a campaign that we did in, I think it was July last year. And it was a campaign that happened out of, for me, frustration because I'm hearing things all the time from my patients all throughout Australia. And one of the things that we hear every single day is that I can't drive. I'm on medicinal cannabis. I'm on prescribed medications and I legally can't drive. And it was really frustrating because as someone where people go to for support and advice, I didn't have a solution for my patients because there's nothing that I can do. I can write letters, I can offer support, I would refer to different lawyers, I would talk to their workplace, I'll try to do as much as I can, but it doesn't change anything because legally they still can't drive. And it was really, really frustrating for me. And so what I realized was one thing that Ashford does have is a voice, a platform for my patients to be heard. And so I'm like, okay, if that's one thing I can do, let's try and push that as much as possible. And so what I did was I thought of a campaign called the Driving Forward campaign. And the idea is to drive forward this idea that patients should be able to drive, and they should be. And so we looked at different patients that we had within our community, and we looked at, what journeys they were going through, and we interviewed every single patient. And we interviewed about 5 patients and looked at their entire journey and how they have been impacting by the current driving laws. And we actually did a photo shoot with them in a studio, and I depicted them. I put them in mugshots because that's how my patients feel. They feel like they are criminals because they can't drive on medicinal cannabis. So I'm like, well, if that's how the government wants my patients to be perceived, let's show them as an ironic kind of concept. And so then we had a few of our patients with a blackboard with a mugshot, but instead of putting their, I guess, criminal ID, we put who they were as human beings. So we had one patient, Alice, who is a mum. We had another patient who's a teacher. We had another patient who's an electrician. We had another patient who was a business owner. And so these are real people who have real lives, who had families, had real jobs, and that can't bloody drive. and it
Yeah.
was it was just, yeah, it was just frustrating to be in that, it was just a melting pot of frustration, and I still feel that. But I think at that time I was so angry that I'm like, I'm gonna do something about this. I'm gonna do this photo shoot. I'm gonna send this to all the media. I'm gonna make sure that more people know about the current laws. And so we did. We did the photo shoot. We did the interviews. We sent it out to put on social media. Got picked up by The Age and a few other media outlets, and then we raised more awareness. And that was good. But winning the award was really nice, and it was really nice to get recognized, but it still doesn't change anything. Like, the real award for me is for the government to change these laws so that our patients can finally drive and not feel like criminals.
I was going to say, where do you see that going now? Like, because you're in Victoria, correct?
Correct.
So we had that brief moment of, oh, we're
Yes.
gonna have that
Yes.
driving trial
Yeah.
and things are
With the hope.
good. Yeah, and then all of a sudden it was like, not this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that make you feel when obviously you definitely had momentum? You had a lot of buzz around it and
We
people
did.
were with you. They agree with you. I, as a patient, agree with you
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So how did
Yeah.
that make you feel?
It feels really, really frustrating. It makes me even more angry. It makes my blood boil. And I think like I'm not a politician. I'm a healthcare professional and I am representing the voice of all my patients. But we do work with a lot of politicians to let them know what's happening on the ground. And I feel for them because they're fighting for us. They're advocating for us in Parliament House, right? And so for them for this to happen to them as well when they're advocating and for this to be pulled up from underneath them is very frustrating because we've got a plan, we want to do policy reform, we're working with the government, but for them to do this it's difficult for anyone, and it's very difficult for me to know when things will change now. Like if you asked me a year ago, probably had a bit more hope, but at the moment, we don't know. But I think one thing that we can continue to do is to continue to raise more awareness. I think we need more voices. We need more patients sharing their stories. We need more patients sharing their stories directly to MPs so that they can share their stories in Parliament. That's the only way that we can move the dial, because ultimately that's what it's about.
So how do you get that word out with your local community? Like if somebody was looking for how to get involved with it, because is the Driving Forward campaign still an active campaign, or have you kind of wrapped it up, or do you still want more patients to come forward with these stories with you?
Absolutely. So the Driving Forward campaign has been wrapped up, but we are continuously advocating. And so we do have a new website we did a new campaign actually that we did last month. And it was, we had posters put all throughout Melbourne and Sydney. And Brisbane too, I think. And we called it the Anti-Stoner Campaign. And so basically it was a campaign that had, I'm Lisa, I have endometriosis, and I'm stoner, and the word stoner is crossed off. So essentially saying that, patients who have endometriosis are not stoners. And so we have a website called www.astridadvocates.com.au. And so on that website, you can submit your stories. You can just email Astrid directly, DM us on our Instagram, share your stories, and we'll capture them all. And then we'll put it forward to politicians and make sure that more stories are heard.
I love it because I do think that the more people that speak up and talk about how cannabis has played a role in their life to getting that quality of life back, I think it's so important because we do, like you're saying, you had a teacher, you had an electrician, you had a business owner, a mom. Like we're all productive members of society, and
Absolutely.
God, it gets on my nerves. It like breaks
Yeah.
my heart that we're still
Yeah.
called stoners. We're
Yeah.
not. We're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
stoners. I'm a productive member of
Yeah.
society,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
no,
It like I get stories every single week. Like I had another patient only 2 weeks ago. And he's been with us from the very beginning, and he is a truck driver for a removalist. So he works for a company that moves furniture around. And his work asked him whether or not, he was on any prescribed medications, not even medicinal cannabis, prescribed medications. And him, he was doing the right thing, and he declared, I'm on prescribed medications, I'm on medicinal cannabis. And now he's got to go through a whole thing with his work because he's on prescribed medicinal cannabis, and he might lose his job. And it's just ridiculous what our patients have to go through. So I wrote letters, I try to refer to all these clinical papers for him, but they've got to change the rules. It's not fair.
they do. They do. It's weird that this one particular prescribed medication has
Yes.
such a stigma against it
Yeah.
because nowhere else do they ask you, are you on prescribed medication? And you say, oh, I'm on Ambien for sleep. They don't blink an eye. They're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good to know, right? Like nobody, or, when I was younger, oh, I'm on birth control to regulate my period. Like nobody cares.
No one
Nobody, girl,
cares.
that's your business.
No
But the
one cares.
second you're like,
Take cannabis.
I'm gonna be transparent and I'm gonna come clean because you've asked, am I on prescribed medication? And this is a prescribed medication, so I'm going to tell you. And then all of a sudden it's like the gauntlet comes down and
Yep.
you're back to that, oh, you're a stoner,
Yep.
you're a liability,
Yep.
you're this, you're that. It's
Yeah,
horrible.
exactly. Yeah. And also like it breaks my heart because these patients have families. Like, if this patient is the primary breadwinner for his family, he's got 2 kids and his wife doesn't work. And so what is he going to do if he loses his job? It just breaks my heart that the system is not like, it's so simple. Just change the rules and then it doesn't impact so many people's lives.
Yeah, like to you and I, it's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
Because we're sitting on the side where we're like, hi, look at the quality of life these people are getting back. Look at the fact that they're, again, productive members of society. Like what you're saying, a breadwinner in a family. Hi, if you're a breadwinner in a family, you definitely know how to hold down a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you are a productive member of society.
Yeah.
You are contributing back not only to
Yeah.
society but to your family. And now
Yeah.
it's like I said, I'm with you. It breaks my heart to hear that in today's day and age, patients are still having to fight and have to advocate for
Yeah.
themselves so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
So what's next for you, Lisa? What's next for Astrid?
Ooh, we have so many exciting things happening, and my ADHD can't handle it. It's like stimulus overload for me at the moment. But we have a really awesome clinic and dispensary team at the moment, and we are going to be launching something really exciting in the next few months. So watch this space. That will really enhance and take the cannabis experience to the whole new level for our community. So I can't say much more than that because it's still under wraps at the moment, but we will be doing a big announcement and things like that soon with, some of the things that we're going to be doing, but basically moving more towards cannabis wellness, looking at other things that cannabis patients can use in their day-to-day routine, and moving more towards how else can Astrid normalize this conversation for patients and make it just like another thing in their ritual.
I love it. I wish you could tell us more, but I'm definitely going to watch this space for sure. I love it. I love that you're so committed to, again, having that community engagement and breaking those stigmas and advocating for your patients. Hats off to you. Hats off to you. As we come to the end of the podcast, I like to always wrap up with something educational. And I do know that we've covered a lot of topics, but if you were to leave the listener with one nugget of information, what would it be, Lisa?
I would say one of the things is not really about cannabis, it's more about life and business and everything else. But one of the things I learned recently from one of my mentors was that I should every so often write a letter to my future self, and then write a letter to my future self about how I feel right now in this moment when I'm going through anything, whether it is, my frustration with the drug driving laws, whether it is, where the cannabis industry is right now in 2024, whether it is stuff that we're going on in our personal lives right now. How do we feel right now? And write it to our future self in 5 years' time. And it's almost like a future manifest so that, our future self can read about it and then put a little reminder in my phone for 5 years' time so that I can read it, because then we can see how far we've grown as individuals and as human beings. Because I'm hoping that in 5 years' time, the drug driving laws will change and I can read this letter going, oh, that was a piece of cake. Why did I even complain about that?
That's amazing. Like that is amazing advice, to be honest, because you're so right. Because right when you get wrapped up in it, you feel like it's overwhelming and it's
Yeah.
this and it's that, and
Yeah.
you don't you like what you're saying. You've lost a little bit of hope about what's on the other side there with what's going on. And I had a teacher once tell me that, oh, don't worry, you'll look back on it and it'll be a grain of sand in the beach of
Yeah.
life.
Perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. But I gotta be honest, I love the idea of writing a letter to myself. I should start doing that when I get really kind of overwhelmed with things.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to, ground yourself and bring you back to,
Yeah.
what's really important.
Absolutely. I think particularly for the cannabis industry, because they say that 1 year in the cannabis industry is like, dog years. And so for all of us who have been in this industry for a while, it's a lot, right? It's like, it's so fast paced, it's very dynamic, it's like no other industry I've ever been in. But I really want us all to remember that we have achieved a lot as an industry, as a community. We've done so much. And so like, let's write these letters and let's really celebrate our wins so far. Like drug driving, sure, that's been a hard one, but we still have more voices about drug driving now compared to 5 years ago. So if you think about that, we've still come a long way.
I think that's an excellent place to end the podcast, Lisa. Thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure getting to talk to you.
No worries. Thanks so much, Christina.
And that's a wrap. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, your greatest strength is your realness, the kind that makes fake people uncomfortable and the authentic inspired.